My name is Melissa Grant. I'm the president of the Pacific Palisades Democratic Club. Yay. And I welcome you all to the State Senate Candidates Forum for the 26th seat in the State Senate. Our next candidate is Sandra Fluke.
Can you all hear me if I just stand out here and talk to you?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great.
Peter.
Oh, where's the mic there? Oh.
I don't even know how I'm doing it. Okay, maybe that, I'll just stay here. Magical powers, take note. I'm the candidate with evidently electronic magical powers. Hello everyone. Some of you may know me best as a national progressive advocate who took on Rush Limbaugh in 2012 and served as a surrogate for the president in his re-election campaign. That did not involve using microphones, evidently. But what I want to tell you about now is the more important aspects of my work, which have been here in Los Angeles for a number of years. My husband and I have been making this our home for about 7 years, and I'm proud to say that I've been leading on legislation in Sacramento during that time. I'm proud of the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights that we had Governor Brown sign this past fall. I'm proud of the work that I did with Raising California together to ensure that we're investing in early childhood education. And I'm proud of the legislation I've worked on with State Senator Holly Mitchell to make sure that we're respecting the reproductive rights of all women here in California. Now, that type of legislation and that type of advocacy work is what I've been doing for about 10 years now. And that's why I'm proud to have the endorsements of several state senators, Holly Mitchell, Carol Liu, Hannah Beth Jackson, a number of members of Congress, as well as Nuri Martinez, an LA City Council member, and a long list of local and community leaders. Because they've been working with me, and they know that I have the experience necessary to hit the ground running day one in Sacramento, drafting legislation, building the coalitions it takes to get it passed. But they also know that my career has actually not been about figuring out how to get into elected office, figuring out how to get the best title in front of my name. Because I've actually spent my career as an attorney fighting for survivors of violence, representing victims of human trafficking and domestic violence here in Los Angeles. And that's what really drives me, is making sure that I'm giving a voice to those who have been silenced in our society for far too long. And that's the kind of voice I'll be in Sacramento. An independent voice focused not on political gain and ambition, but on what's best for my community, for our community. And that's something you can trust about me, because I don't think that my work on the national stage, standing up to Rush Limbaugh or campaigning for the president, qualifies me to be your state senator. The work I've been doing for 10 years on legislation qualifies me. But that work gives you an example of what my character looks like. So you can know that when I'm under attack for doing the right thing for all of you, I will stand firm and I won't back down, even when it gets personal, even when it's hard for me. And that is a promise that I make to all of you. I hope to earn your support. I want to go to Sacramento to fight to protect our environment, to create good paying jobs, and to make sure that we're investing in the educational future of all of our children. Thank you so much.
First question is this. Last week, Governor Brown issued a second executive order aimed at reducing the impact of the California drought. And the governor's $11.1 billion water bond to overhaul the state's water system will be on the ballot this November. What are your thoughts on this bond measure, and what ideas would you promote for our district to protect our most valuable resources?
Thank you. I'll try this from the microphone this time. I actually have some concerns about Governor Brown's bond measure. I favor a different bond measure that has more of a local control bent to it, because I think that's where we solve our water problems. First of all, is by taking local action in 3 ways. Number one, we need to conserve better. Here in Southern California, we're actually much better than a lot of other areas in our water conservation, but we can still continue to improve. Especially in this district where we have some very large land lots and we're using our water in inefficient ways to water the grass, that type of thing. Now that brings me to the second point, which is recycling of water. Right now, you probably all know the Hyperion water plant. It's pumping 250 million gallons of water per day into Santa Monica Bay. Santa Monica Bay has enough water, we could use more for ourselves. And so we need to be able to recycle that water that's already been purified and cleaned and use it in gray water for non-potable purposes. Things like that type of watering.
Yeah.
Now, third, we need to encourage rainwater capture. Because right now, we're in a drought and then it rains and people think that the problem is solved. Actually, 50 to 80% of the water just runs off when it rains and is completely wasted to all of us. So we need to encourage homeowners and municipalities to invest in that kind of capture so that we're making use of every single drop. Now, all of that is what we can do here locally, but there are some responsibilities that the rest of the state needs to take on. We need to make sure that agriculture is moving toward drip water irrigation and making them internalize the costs of their water use to get them to make that change. And we need to make sure that every part of the state actually has water meters so that homeowners are being responsible the way we already are here. I'm proud to say that I actually have some volunteers on my team who are part of the Army Corps of Engineers and who have specifically told me that they're part of my campaign because they believe I have the best plan for addressing the water crisis here in California. Thank you.
Okay, our second question, Ms. Fluke will have the first go at it. California's financial picture has improved dramatically. And Governor Brown has once a rainy day fund to guard against future downturns in the economy. But the state remains very vulnerable to various shortfalls that have not yet been made up. Things affecting teacher pensions, health care for retired state workers, tuition assistance, and vital social services. Do you agree with Governor Brown's rainy day fund? And if not, what would you do in the alternative?
Thank you. There's so much wrapped up in that question. You know, I am very proud of us as a state that we have gotten ourselves back on the right fiscal track and now have a budget surplus, but right now is a really critical time for our decisions about how we're going to handle that surplus. I favor a balanced approach that makes sure that we are paying down debt, also putting away some reserves for the future so that we don't have this kind of volatile cycle of state services being implemented and then cut again. But as some of my fellow advocates recently said, you don't put money in your savings account when people are starving. And right now, here in California, we have an incredibly high poverty rate. We're number 5 in the country for child poverty. And so we need to desperately need to reinvest in the social services that were slashed during the recession. And that's critical to our economy continuing to grow, because those kinds of services help and benefit the middle class that then turns and uses that money in our economy, creating jobs. So that's the approach I would take right now. But what's critical to us going forward is reform of Prop 13. We all know this. We're never going to be able to fund the services that are desperately needed in our state and keep ourselves on good, stable fiscal footing until we have tax reform. Now, we have to continue to protect property owners, home property owners, from skyrocketing increases. That's not the path. But there are right now massive corporate loopholes that can be closed, and there's a lot that can be done to ensure that we actually have the flexibility to enact a tax code that makes sense for our state in 2014. Thank you.
What reforms do you believe are needed to improve the quality of public education? The state used to be known for its public education. What are your thoughts for motivating young people to pursue teaching careers, for state budgeting on education, for the role of charter schools and the core curriculum? There's a lot to talk about. What would you like to address? Is fine with us.
Well, I told you in the opening that Los Angeles is my chosen home. We talk about our chosen family. This is my chosen home. But I want to tell you why I sought out this community as one that I wanted to be a part of. It's because where I grew up, education really wasn't valued, and there weren't a lot of economic opportunities as a result. I'm actually the first person in my father's family to go to college. The public school that I attended, the chair of the school board did not have a high school diploma and was very, very proud of not having that diploma and had no intentions of seeking a GED. So I've seen the consequences of not investing in education and what that does to children's future and what it does to an entire community and the fabric of that community. And that's why I am very concerned about the incredibly low levels of investment in our public education system here, 49th in the country in per pupil funding. But I'm also concerned about the direction that we're going. I believe that the Common Core standards are the right way to go, but we haven't given our schools the necessary resources to implement them in the right way. For example, we give $250 for teacher training and resources to get ready for these new standards. Does anyone think that was adequate? No, of course not. It's ridiculous. We're also moving our students toward computerized testing in just a few years on those new standards, but our schools don't have computers to be able to get these kids ready to take their tests that way. We're setting them up for that kind of failure. So we have to stop acting as if Prop 98 funding is adequate for our schools and instead extend Prop 30 and make sure that we are getting our investment to where it should be. Now that begins with early childhood education, an issue I've worked on for quite some time. It's the smart place to make an investment because it pays dividends throughout the entire educational system, and it doesn't end with high school graduation. Public higher education is incredibly important. I worked with Young Invincibles to make sure that we were addressing the increasing, staggering student loan debt that students here in California are facing as a result of the fact that our public tuition in the Cal State and the UC system has doubled in the last 5 years. That's something I would put a stop to and start reinvesting in our entire educational system.
And this question relates to transportation. In 2008, the voters approved the high-speed rail referendum for $31 billion. Its latest estimates are $68 billion. Do you agree that this is the most important public works project for California's future? Or should we be focusing on other priorities? What do you see as the greatest challenges for us in transportation? Should we complete the Metro Expo Line project and put our investment there? What are your opinions on these transportation issues?
I believe in the vision of high-speed rail for our state, but right now we're not achieving that vision with this current project. Now, I believe in that vision for two primary reasons. One, because public transportation of this sort, both high-speed rail and local metro public transit, is how we're going to address the coming consequences and the current consequences of climate change. So this is imperative for our health that we take these types of steps. But secondly, how many of you have gone to Sacramento to meet with your legislators to make your voices heard on bills? Yeah. Now, you either paid for an expensive plane ticket to get there or you suffered through a very long drive. And I've been on those long drives, those buses filled with domestic workers and low-wage workers, taking them to Sacramento to make sure that they were heard. Things like high-speed rail that connects us to Sacramento is about public and community empowerment in our government. So there are multiple reasons why we need to get to high-speed rail. However, the current project has been criminally mismanaged financially, and we should not be pouring more investments into it until we know that that's going to change. This is the type of project that is perfect for a public-private partnership. We should make use of the federal funds that we can, but we should bring in private industry on board. Government is not the answer to every problem that we face, and this is an area where we could use private investment to create jobs, to create the infrastructure that we need, and to address a crushing bill for this type of 30 seconds for this type of infrastructure. So that's the plan I would have for high-speed rail. Here locally, I believe in investing in extending the Expo line, the Purple line, making sure that we are taking the steps we need to expand the 405 bypass. I moved away from Santa Monica to West Hollywood to get away from the 405. So we've got to do this because I'd like to come back west. Thank you.
You hear a lot about money in politics and how the corruption of money is now in the Supreme Court's decision and all that. I'd like to hear and the transparency that doesn't seem to be forthcoming in how people who are running for office get their money. So I'd like to hear opinions on that.
The question relates to the fact that there's a great deal of money in politics and the problems that emerge from that. And his concern is one of transparency, how candidates get their money, what happens when they're elected, how do they get their money.
I actually have a number of proposals to try to address the role of money in politics. First of all, I would like to put in place measures that prohibit legislators from fundraising during the very critical parts of the legislative term when those high-pressure votes are happening, so that we don't see those kinds of transactions where there's money exchanging hands one day and votes exchanging hands the next day. Secondly, I have looked at public financing plans around the country. I believe there are some that we could implement that match small dollar donations, and that not only brings public financing into the system and decreases the role of dark and corrupt money and special interest money, but it also encourages citizens and small dollar donors to be more involved, because that's ultimately what's needed here. Part of the reason that large moneyed interests are able to control this system in the way that they are is that some of us have ceded that control. So we have to find ways of bringing the community and bringing citizens back into the process. I do also believe that we need more transparency about if there are particular special interests or industries that are backing candidates. And I would push for measures to require that be revealed on mailers, all those mailers you guys are about to already receiving that I'm sure you're recycling at least, right? You're not just throwing them in the trash. So I would like to see transparency about if a candidate is being predominantly funded by one particular special interest or industry. And I will tell you this. I am beginning this process of helping to reform and clean up Sacramento by my own campaign. My campaign is funded by small dollar donors, not by special interests. In the first reporting period, we had over 600 individual donors. The average size of that donation was about $214. That's because I am an advocate for the public interest, not the special interest. And that's how I will continue to conduct my career.
Among friends, I'm going to ask a question I remember from the late 60s, early 70s. Marijuana. LSD, Rockefeller makes it, Richard Nixon takes it. Why can't we?
Did everybody hear the question? You had interesting sound effects from the speakers for that question. Do you want me to ask?
Oh, no.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Go ahead. You can say
Well, the question basically is, why not us for marijuana? Other states have done it. Why not us?
I will soldier on despite that toxic water. Talk about the other water crisis, right? See, I can be fun at debates, Ben. Okay, the question's about pot, right? So I believe that we have a long way to go on our medicinal marijuana regulation right now. It's clearly, our regulations are not adequate. I'm glad to see that we've made some progress in recent months with both law enforcement as well as advocates from the community coming to the table to think about the right way to regulate this. I do think that we need to move to legalize recreational marijuana as well for a number of reasons. Let's do it in a way that makes sure we're addressing the health consequences. Let's learn from states like Washington on how to do it right, because they are making some mistakes, but we can improve upon that. But some of the most important reasons why we need to take this step are that we need the tax base, and because it is a civil rights violation. Right now, disproportionately, the arrests for nonviolent possession crimes of things like marijuana are happening in communities of color, and this is one of the challenges of our time that we must address.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask each of the candidates a simple yes or no question, and then we're going to have our closing statements. We'll have to keep them to 2 minutes for closing statements, okay? So I'm going to start with who started last time. Ms. Butler did. So Ms. Fluke, it's a very simple question. Would you support a future state legislative effort to have single-payer Medicare for all in our health system? Yes or no?
Hell yeah.
Single-payer Medicare for all, would you support it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr.
Thumbs up,
Brown?
yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ms. Butler? All right. Okay.
I think your first question when you're deciding who you want as your next elected official, whether it's state senator or any elected representative, should be, are they able to do the job? And I hope that I've demonstrated to you tonight and in our personal conversations that I'm absolutely ready to do this job. I've been working on legislation at the state level for 10 years now. I've worked on legislation around any number of the topics we've discussed tonight with a long list of coalitions and nonprofits. I've drafted it, I've built the coalitions it takes to get it passed, I've negotiated it, I understand how this process works, and I'm confident that I can be a champion for you in Sacramento. So that should be your first question. But secondly, I think you have to ask yourself, is this someone I trust, and do I know enough about their character? And I hope that I've demonstrated to you in the way I've conducted my campaign and in what you've known of me over several years, that I have the character of someone who cares deeply about the public interest. It's why I've devoted my entire career to it, and why I will continue to do that. I'm running for office now because I believe it is the way that I can most effectively continue the work that I've begun. The work that I started with my very first piece of legislative advocacy when I co-founded a statewide coalition that ended discrimination against LGBTQ folks in family court. That legislation had been stalled for 20 years, and I was able to end that discrimination. The kind of work that I've continued with the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, with reproductive rights bills, with championing environmental measures and economic justice measures. And throughout all of that work, I have always done it hand in hand with the people who will be impacted by the legislation. Because that's the kind of leader and legislator I will always be, the one who involves the community and makes sure that that's how we move forward together. Because it doesn't take just one legislator to write and pass legislation. It takes an entire community to make that change happen and to implement it. And I understand that. So I look forward to not only being your state senator, but working with all of you to create the kind of progressive change that we all deeply believe in. Thank you.